Welcome to Reporter's Notebook, where we talk to the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the stories breaking on their beats. I'm Jim Antle. I'm joined today by Congressional reporter Juliegrace Brufke. Juliegrace, been some interesting developments in some of these Senate races, 50-50 split in the Senate, Republicans trying to retake the chamber. Some races that have been close, we're questioning whether that's still going to be the case after some allegations against one of the candidates, and other races that looked like they might be settled in the Democrats' favor, getting tighter now. What are some of the things that you're seeing?
I feel like, well, this week, obviously Herschel Walker had come under fire. We saw Rick Scott go down, Tom Cotton go down to kind of rally behind him.
Sure.
He's kind of having issues kind of combating that entire narrative there. So he's been holding rallies, but I mean, he's definitely lagging in the polls right now. So
Right. I mean, that's a race that's kind of gone back and forth. Walker's never really reliably led, but he's at times been tied, but he's at times been down a good bit. And these allegations that he paid for an ex-girlfriend's abortion have kind of thrown a wrench into the race at a time where he seemed to have a little bit of momentum, maybe.
So we've seen Democrats come out and use the footage of his son coming out against him, and I mean, I feel like it's kind of a race that's gotten really ugly, where domestic abusive allegations are being thrown on both sides of the aisle and attacking each other. So it's I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how things pan out. I know there's a debate coming up, and see how that pans out. But I think there's definitely some challenges for Herschel Walker kind of be able to kind of make up that gap.
Now, in another race, the Pennsylvania Senate race, John Fetterman, the Democratic candidate, looked like he had a decent lead for a while, but that race has been tightening, and it's attracted a new set of controversies over his health.
So, I mean, that race is definitely tightened. He had a pretty substantial lead earlier this summer, and I've seen some polls with Oz up recently. They've got their debate coming up. Obviously, he's had some speech issues. We saw with the NBC interview this week that he's had some challenges with that, having to use a teleprompter. One of the NBC reporters had come out and said that she wasn't sure if he could totally comprehend what they were saying ahead of the interview, which has kind of riled people up a little bit.
It attracted some backlash.
Yeah, so it's, I mean, I think the debate, early voting started already, so that's going to have an impact there. But I think the debate will be interesting to see how that kind of pans out and how they prepare, because I know Dr. Oz's team is kind of looking forward to have that moment. And I mean, back in the day, we saw Senator Kirk, people would come out, it's kind of a similar situation, but it seems like people have kind of, especially on the Democratic side, kind of rallied around Fetterman to kind of keep pushing to get him in there.
Right. I mean, there was a major Chicago paper that didn't end up endorsing Mark Kirk in 2016 because they were concerned about his recovery from his stroke, whether he'd be up to the job for a 6-year term. But there's been a real pushback when some of those critiques have been made, or at least questions raised about Fetterman, that this is ableist, that this is the equivalent of not wanting a person in a wheelchair or even wearing glasses to serve in the Senate. So some people have tried to treat these questions as if they're sort of illegitimate.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely been a thing. I know that there's kind of been a big push for him to release his health records, and his campaign hasn't done it, and they've just asserted that he's getting better, but he's more than fit to serve as a senator. So, I mean, I think that push will continue through Election Day, and I think the next couple weeks it's going to be telling kind of how things pan out there.
Yeah, it's hard to know how voters will respond to that, because obviously the Senate has, over time, had a lot of older senators whose cognitive abilities have been questioned. Certainly Senator Dianne Feinstein has faced some of those questions. Senator Strom Thurmond served until he was 100 years old, wasn't really at the end traveling back and forth between D.C. and South Carolina. So we've seen long entrenched incumbents weather these things, but whether a new candidate to be a new senator can do that is an open question.
It's definitely going to be a challenge for him.
So the Ohio Senate race is also pretty close, and that's a state that Trump won by 8 points over Joe Biden in 2020, had been trending pretty red, but Tim Ryan has really sort of taken it to J.D. Vance.
Yes, I mean, I definitely talked to some Republicans that have told me they've had some frustrations that they're having to spend in Ohio, given that they kind of thought it was going to be a gimme there. So I saw a poll today where they're within the margin of error there. Like J.D. Vance has kind of had some issues raising money. He, I talked to some people who've had some frustrations that he wasn't out on the campaign trail, kind of out there more early. And, I mean, agree with his policies or not, Tim Ryan's kind of had a seamless campaign. So they had their debate. It was pretty heated. There were definitely some zingers in there earlier this week. And but I mean, I think that right now J.D. Vance still kind of has the edge from
It's a
everyone I've talked to.
Republican-leaning state, and Governor Mike DeWine is also up for re-election this year, and he looks like he's built a pretty healthy lead.
I think in the poll I saw today, he was 8 points up, and I know there's a lot of outside groups that are definitely dumping money in to kind of try and boost J.D. Vance there in the final stretch. So I think Tim Ryan's kind of seen less of that on the Dem side.
Sure.
So it's I think obviously that extra spending, having him out there, his ads on the airwaves, makes a difference.
Right, the spending, and also, these governors, in Georgia with Brian Kemp leading while Herschel Walker is maybe not, Mike DeWine leading while J.D. Vance is tied or has maybe a small lead depending on the poll that you look at. There is, I guess, the possibility that if there's limited ticket splitting, these governors might drag the Senate candidates across the finish line.
Yeah, they could definitely, I feel like, bump them up a little bit. So it's, probably good news for the Republicans on that side. But yeah, a lot remains to be seen. So I guess there's always, I feel like we've already had a couple October surprises, so we'll see what happens in the next couple weeks.
It was a very popular casserole back in the 70s, October surprise. Thank you, Juliegrace. You can read Juliegrace and the rest of our political team's coverage at washingtonexaminer.com.